Welcome to the Progression Health Podcast. I'm here with Dr. Brian Hanley. Brian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everybody. I am Dr. Brian Hanley. I work at Leeds Utd in the UK, where I'm a reader in sport and exercise biomechanics. I studied applied physiology in my native Ireland before I moved to Leeds 26 years ago, where I studied sport and exercise science. I also have a degree in psychology, and my PhD was in biomechanics of race walking. Although mostly when I was younger, I did cross-country, marathon running, road running of various distances. I was always interested in pacing strategies from competing in distance running and from my coaching. Although my actual interest in biomechanics of athletics really started from coaching the athletes doing the hurdles. So what I've learned in, biomechanics, physiology, psychology, they've helped me to understand the various aspects that are important in competing well in distance running. I have done research on distances from sprints to marathon, but really my main focus is on the biomechanics of endurance events within athletics.
Ideal, yeah. So I did my first half marathon, and then I have another one coming up. And the more I learn about running, the more I realize that a lot of people do it. Or if they don't do it, they'd love to do a bit of running. So I'm like, right. I have a lot of clients who like to be active, obviously, and I'm trying to learn as much as I can about it. So you have the perfect level of experience you've got everything. So what would you say your speciality is? Like, what would you specialize in terms of research?
My main research, if you were to Google me, I suppose it would be the biomechanics of race walking. Now, I'd probably be the world leading expert in the biomechanics of race walking, but it's a quite small area. I never actually did the event myself. What attracted me to do research in it was that it's so complicated and it has specific constraints on gait, which are really interesting from a biomechanics point of view. But, alongside that, I do study biomechanics of running. Most recently, I've been looking at middle distance running, but my expertise covers sort of 800 meters up to marathon. Mostly, I used to do 10K up to marathon myself, so I kind of understand those events a little bit more, and therefore that helps me when I would do research, because I'm able to know what kind of things matter to a marathon runner or a half marathon runner or whatever. In terms of pacing aspect, the reason I really got into that was because I can never understand when I used to race why so many people ran off so fast at the beginning when it was such a long race. So I wanted to study that from a scientific point of view and just see what are people actually doing and maybe understand why they were doing it. So I like all athletics. I've done studies even on pole vault, but my background is in distance running, and that's where I'm hoping to develop the research further.
Brilliant. So hopefully by the end of this, I will be a faster runner from what I picked up. So just a question I'm thinking of is in terms of walking and running. What's the difference typically in terms of the average walk pace and run pace? Like, so the typical recommendation you hear is like you need to do 10,000 steps a day. How much running would you have to do to make to be the same amount of steps in terms of like intensity or calories burned? Do you have any idea how to equate it?
Not really. I mean, 10,000 steps walking would be about 6 kilometers or something. I personally am able to do that. I walk. I don't drive, so I walk back. So I would normally get my steps, but running wise, it's a slightly different thing, of course, because the energy requirements are so much bigger because of how the body moves different. So I don't know what you need to do running wise to make it, or what the walk equivalent. But clearly, if you run 6 kilometers a day, that'll take you a lot less time than walking it. But the energy requirement is sort of a lot.
The Progression Health Podcast has teamed up with TRX. So TRX is a bodyweight training piece of equipment that you can hook up anywhere, anytime. And I highly recommend it. I use it in every session with my clients. I use it to warm up and also for stretching. But if you are traveling, which is where I recommend everyone use it, it's hard to get to a gym. It's hard to find the time. But you could literally work out from your hotel room with the TRX and the door attachment that it has, where it doesn't damage the door, but it gives you an effective workout. I also like to add in other things like glute glute bands and resistance bands. But once you have the TRX, then you can figure all that out. So get yourself 50% off on the TRX home workout equipment with the code PROGRESSIONHEALTH and boost your workout effectiveness and consistency. Progression Health podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is an online therapy service which will help you to more effectively manage your mental health. Mental health is very important, and it's something that all of us are realizing now, especially after the pandemic. During the pandemic, for me especially, it was very challenging, and I reached out to BetterHelp. I tried out a few of their licensed therapists, settled on one for the majority of the pandemic, and I found the help that I received invaluable. And the great thing also is that you can speak to your therapist outside of sessions. If it's not working out, you can switch. Very affordable. It's really easy to use also. And if someone hasn't tried therapy before, but you're kind of, you're curious, I would highly recommend BetterHelp. So what we've done is we've got a sign up link I'll attach in the show notes, and basically you can get a discount to get started and start improving your mental health today. So BetterHelp or better mental health.
Greater. Sometimes actually walking fast is harder than running slowly. So we have something called the walk to run transition, which is where above a certain walking speed, it's actually easier to jog slowly than to walk at the same speed, simply because of the way you're moving. When you run, you store energy a little bit different.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, it's just not a straight equation to switch them over.
No.
Got it. And you just mentioned earlier you did psychology as well as one of your areas you've looked into. How does that tie into like running? Is there any kind of, in terms of like somebody going to do a race or going for a run, is there any kind of psychological tips or ideas you have around that to help people with their running?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we looked at was what's called ego orientation in distance runners. Now that's more the elite end. Like, why do they sort of push themselves to always win? Or, why is winning more important than getting times? And that's not really relevant to the average marathon runner who wants to get around in 3 hours or 3.5 hours or whatever. I think there's a psychological concept that many people might be familiar with called rating of perceived exertion. So if you've ever run as an experiment for someone on a treadmill, they might put a sheet in front of you and it's got numbers on it, and 6 might be really easy and 10 might be feeling a bit hard, and 20 is maximum effort. It's called the RPE scale, and sometimes, if you like, our brains have this internally to some extent, as in we know that a certain pace feels easy or hard, but the problem is that with rating of perceived exertion is the fact that it has the word perceived in it. It's not a real measure of actual physiological effort. So what can happen is that runners can fool themselves into thinking that they're running effortlessly when actually they're running very hard in terms of using up energy and tiring out their muscles. So if you feel like, I always just say as a coach, if you feel at the beginning of a race that you're running too fast, then you're definitely running too fast. If you feel like you're running at the right speed, you're still too fast. And even if you feel like you're running too slowly, you're probably still running too fast. So I think that this happens to even the elite runners, because if you're doing a marathon, the first mile will feel easy if you train properly. So often you go faster than you should because you're running at the speed you feel like you perceive as being easy, but that speed would be really difficult at the end of the race. So in a way, you have to ignore how you feel. Some people do that by, maybe they wear a heart rate monitor. Sometimes people might go by a certain time that they're aiming for. I think it's important not to ignore that. So if you're aiming to do 7-minute miling because you want to do the marathon in about 3 hours, and you do the first mile in 6 minutes, it might have felt easy, but the next one's going to feel harder, and so on and so on. So in a way, you need an objective measure, like a stopwatch, to contain yourself, because your rating of perceived exertion is probably going to be lower than what is helpful, if that makes sense. So in a way, you have to ignore how you feel at the beginning of a race, because it's going to affect you later.
Yeah, so it's like, don't try and trust your gut and have a plan. That's so funny you use that example, because when I did the half marathon, I was like, all right, I'll follow this pacer. And I had the loosest plan ever, and it was, in hindsight, it was a terrible idea, but it was just like, I'll follow this pacer. And of course, the pacer that was nearest to me was someone way faster than me. And I ended up by mile 9 at a walking pace, thinking that I had ruined the whole race. And I had just, my rate of exertion was like, oh, sure, it's, it's not too hard, basically. I know I'm going fast, but it's not too hard. And I was actually going way faster than I had intended to. Yeah. So basically, to your point, our feeling is not accurate. And
no, it's hopelessly inaccurate. It's just, but it even happens to the world's best, especially middle distance. You wouldn't believe that in the most 800-meter races, even in the heats in the Olympics or whatever, nearly all the athletes will do the first 200 meters at world record pace. And of course, they don't finish at that speed. There's no need to do it. The world's best marathoners will probably not make the same mistake. Having said that, in general, they do actually start too fast. They don't look like they're going too fast. That's another thing. Often when you watch a marathon, let's say it's the Olympic marathon or a world championship marathon, everybody in the first 5-10 kilometers looks really easy. And the way, if you analyze the race just watching it on the television, the way you would believe it works is that everybody starts off slowly, and towards the end, the best guys just sprint away from the others, or they move away. When in reality, at the beginning, they're working really hard. And instead of a certain group moving away by moving faster, actually those guys, the ones at the back, they're just slowing down a lot earlier. And this happens more for men. So it's not just their own feelings of perceived exertion that are slightly wrong. It's also the way they look. They look like they're running easy, but internally they're running out of fuel already, too quickly relative to the distance.
Yeah, and isn't there also like a delayed effect? So like you could be running at top speed and your heart rate only gets up to its max heart rate kind of after the fact. So that would make sense as well. Like physiologically, there's like a delayed effect.
Yeah. I actually was talking about this to someone else earlier today, that I'd read somewhere someone was saying, "Oh, I'm going to aim for, I don't know, 185 beats per minute." It was something quite high, actually. I thought, how can you? It doesn't work like that, because your heart rate monitor doesn't pick up exactly what you have at that exact instant. Sometimes it reports to you something that has just happened. And like you say, sometimes you could be running a race, and it's when you stop that suddenly your heart rate increases. So sort of a compensatory mechanism or whatever. So although heart rate monitors are useful and so on, it's not always the case that what the heart rate you see is the heart rate actually have at that instant. It's not instantaneous feedback.
Yeah. So then to kind of avoid going at too high a heart rate or too high a pace, it sounds like planning is like absolutely essential. Is that the kind of way to mitigate against that?
Yeah, it's about self-control. I read a quote from an Irish coach a few days ago, and I think it was something like, you have to learn patience. So I debated this with someone, and they said that they think it's better for athletes to go fast. So let's say it's a classic example is the world cross country or any cross country, because there's no clocks or anything. Nobody knows the exact distance. Nobody knows really how fast they're going. So everybody goes off really fast. Some people, this guy was saying, yeah, but if you don't try to keep up at the beginning, you can lose heart and feel like you're not going to catch them up. So for morale, it's better. But my argument would be the other way around. I think you're better off starting off slowly, knowing people are going to go too fast, and then, pass them out. So there was an Irish race walker in the 2012 Olympics, and she told me after about 2 kilometers, which is one lap, she looked back and there was barely anybody behind her, and she started worrying, am I going too slowly? But actually she picked up people over, and she passed out, I don't know, half the field at least. I think it was actually more than that. She passed out. So in a way, you have to trust yourself that don't go too fast. People will slow down, and it'll feel better when you start passing them out later in the race. And actually that gives you such a psychological boost that you probably do better than you would if you're on your own or whatever. So you have to, the word confidence means trust. So self-confidence means self-trusting. So confidence isn't about believing you can do something that's impossible. It's about knowing yourself, knowing what you can do, and trusting yourself. So that's what you have to develop. Recently, it was last year, I spoke with an Australian coach, and told me what he'd done is looked at my pacing profiles of what actually happens in races. And they got their top athlete who was going to be competing in the Olympics. She got to the final, actually. They wanted her to run in training like you actually run in a race, rather than what
The
you
old
don't think
adage,
it's going to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that what they did was they took the watch off her. They didn't tell her anything. They just got a lot of other athletes who knew what to do, and they varied pace according to what normally happens in a Olympic final or whatever. And the athlete found it really strange not knowing what time it was and that, but she just had to learn to, if you like, trust herself and be ready for the unexpected or whatever. So, 1500 is a race like a marathon, but sometimes you have to learn to trust yourself, because there's another good example, if you don't mind me picking it, but in 1972, so 50 years ago, the Olympic 800 meters was won by an American called Dave Watt. And if you watch the video on YouTube or anywhere else, I think they'll often describe it as an example of an athlete not giving up, because by 200 meters he was, but eventually as the race went on, he caught up, and he won on the line by a tiny margin. Now, for me, that is not an example of not giving up, because he's an elite athlete in the Olympic final. What it actually was really amazing pace, because he did nearly every single 100-meter section in 13 seconds, which added up to 140. So he had very even pace the whole way through. Now, he said part of the reason he didn't go off really fast at the beginning was he simply couldn't keep up. But in a way, he would have trusted himself. This speed is too fast. I'll catch up later. Maybe he didn't know he was going to win the race. Maybe he didn't know he was going to work that well. But Kelly Holmes in 2004, the women's 800 meters, she did the same, even pace pretty much the whole way around. Went from about last to first. So if you know what time you want to achieve, if you know you've done the training, things will happen a certain way. People will always slow down. If people are going off a world record pace in the first 200 meters, they're not going to do world. It's just not going to happen. So you have to trust yourself, and you have to trust reality, if you like. And if somebody does break the world record, okay, well, what could you have done about it? So having the ability is one thing, but you can easily lose out because of stupid tactics, and that goes from Olympic champion recreational.
Yeah, having a plan in place. And it's funny, I mentioned patience. I was talking to a client about patience, and I was saying, do you get more patience as you get older? And she's like, unfortunately not. But I think you can be aware, kind of like you said, reacting to like people going at a world record pace. If you know that you're impatient, you can always make a plan to try and account for that. So especially with the running, do you think saving the approach that you're kind of mentioning, saving a bit for the end of the race, do you think you can try and run a sort of like your own record time in the last couple of miles, or like just speaking of a half marathon, in the last couple of miles, or what's a kind of a useful strategy to approach a race from if you start slow?
Well, even pace is physiologically even pace is the best one. So if you want to do 92 minutes for the half marathon, that's 7 minute mile. So you want to do every mile in 7 minutes. That's the reality. You might want to do a negative split. So you might want to start off at 7:10, gradually speed up. The only problem with that is there is a really nice paper a few years ago on how the reality is sometimes you can't make up. If you go too slowly, there's nothing you can do physiologically to catch up the difference. So if you do too many of these 7:10, physiologically, you might not be able to start doing 6:50s and 6:40s towards the end of the race. That's why even pace is better. But if you can run at your maximum aerobic speed, so where you're not using any anaerobic energy, and you can do that for 12 or 12 and a half, 13 miles of your half marathon, you'll be able to sprint the end. So knowing what that speed is helpful. Knowing what you can achieve is helpful. The reality is, if you haven't trained well enough, it doesn't really matter what pace you start off, you're not going to make. But if you know you're able to do it, then you should be able to have a little bit in reserve. But if you start off too fast, all that sprint finish energy, if you want to call it that, the anaerobic energy, it's already gone. So there's no way you're going to use it at the end. You're not going to get it.
Yeah, if it's not there to begin with, you can't pull it back.
If you've already used it up. And
the sprint to finish, then, that kind of idea, I'm just thinking of it now, that's from what you said, it's probably not ideal. You wouldn't want to sprint. And when I say sprint, I say that pretty loosely, but let's just say you're running at an even pace for the first 10 miles of the 13 and a half. You wouldn't want to go from something like, I think I'll be doing like an 8-minute mile. I wouldn't want to go and try and go for the final 3 for like 6 minutes. Or would you want to kind of minimize the difference from that average pace as much as possible? Do you want to keep it as consistent as possible? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not, if the course is not flat. I ran a race in England. It's quite well known. It's called the Great North Run in Newcastle. I was lucky enough to be in the elite field for that. Did 71 minutes, but it's famous because, actually it's not famous, but It's one of those courses where actually, if you get a record on it, it doesn't count as a world record or whatever, because its net is downhill. So people go into the race thinking it's going to be this nice, easy downhill, but it's not like that at all. It's really undulating. So you're kind of up and down for about 12 miles or something. Then there's this big drop to the river or the seaside or whatever it is. Can't remember very well. And then you run on a flat bit again. So yes, the end of the race is below where the start of the race was, but it's not a flat course, or it's not a downhill course like that. So you will get parts of the race that are slightly slower or slightly faster. You have to take that into account, or if it's really windy, you have to take those into account, because all of those things are going to affect. So they can adjust what you need to do. One point I'd make about heart rate monitors is that I don't know if you know what Leeds is like, but it's really hilly. And I remember wearing heart rate monitors trying to get a certain percentage of, and I just couldn't do it, because every time I came to a hill, every time you tried running down a hill, didn't matter how fast you went, you couldn't get it high enough. So you couldn't even do an even effort the whole time, simply because places. So that's part of the reason I gave up ever using a stopwatch. I just didn't find them useful. Using a watch was more useful for knowing the times I wanted to achieve. All other things being equal, let's say it's a flat course and it's not too windy and it's not raining or anything like that. Yeah, you want to be as even as possible the whole way around. You might underachieve a little bit, because it's hard to know exactly what the optimum pace is, but it's better to slightly underdo it a little bit for let's say 12 miles, and then easily do the last part.
Got it. Yeah. So
speed up a bit.
Yeah, slightly. Yeah. If you have it as well. So I use the app Strava to run, and now you're making me think. So my first question is, what are your thoughts on an app like that? And then I have my own training times. So I'm thinking, I'm not just magically going to run, like 50% faster on the day, like my times in training are my times in training. So how accurate is an app like that? And then if you use something like that, would you just take your average time and maybe slow it down a little bit for an actual race to get a good kind of time to aim for? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I never used any apps or anything like that. So different people prefer different things. My approach, like I said, I tried using the heart rate monitor. I found it was a waste of time, simply because the terrain we have in Leeds. My approach was always to go by times. Now, what I mean by that is, what I liked to do is there would be various parts of where I live where they'd have races. So there was a 10-mile race near my unit, and I would get the bus out of that place, and I'd do warm up and whatever, and then I would do that exact 10-mile course. Now, it was quite hilly, but I knew it was a 10-mile exactly measured course, and I would try to do that in under an hour every time I did, and would know because like I said, some parts were downhill, some parts were uphill. I knew where I wanted to be at mile 1, mile 2, mile 3. They might not be same speed, but I knew where I wanted to be, and I could compare with different days. Luckily, I knew where all the mile markers were, because they'd marked them out for the race. And there was another one I did that was about, I think it was a 10k race, and I would do that 3 times to get up to about whatever it is, 18 and a bit miles. And I knew where the markers were, so I always went by time. I wasn't necessarily trying to do race speed. I wasn't necessarily running at 10k pace for that, or marathon pace, but I knew, because the watch doesn't lie, and I was able to monitor, was I getting better or not, by maybe how quickly I did those runs, or how easy I felt doing them, because I wasn't necessarily doing them to do them as fast as possible. My time to do the 10 miles in training might be 5 minutes slower than the race, but so half a minute per mile slower. But I think that approach worked for me. I like I said, I don't know apps, but because I didn't use, I trusted myself. I prefer to trust myself and the watch and how I was feeling, rather than the app. So I never used. I can't help you on that particular question. But I would say as well that for me personally, I was always better in a race than in trainings. For me, there was a psychological boost of being in competition. Some people, they go the opposite, and I think some of those people, it's because they go too fast, didn't race it. You have to have a racing brain. But I think a lot of technology nowadays is very useful, but sometimes it takes over. That makes sense. People are more interested in a certain metric than what actually matters, which is the time usually.
Yeah, I feel as though it overcomplicates things sometimes. I can imagine how just having a watch would just really simplify the whole thing. Just in terms of performance, I'm just thinking to myself, so I like to drink coffee, and on the day I was like, I'll have a little bit more coffee. What are your thoughts around caffeine for, half marathon running? Should you have less? Should you have more? Should you have the same amount? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I don't drink tea or coffee. I don't drink caffeine really. Keeping
it simple again.
But I saw an interesting presentation about this at a World Athletics event, World 120 Championships. There was a guy from Belgium doing a talk about caffeine. I asked him about it afterwards. He was saying, you could have caffeine mouthwashes. You can have a bit of caffeine drink every few miles, or distance he said was a few miles, something like that. I think different things work to different people. Caffeine can stimulate the brain. It used to be a banned substance over a certain amount, but now it's allowed. So it's a diuretic, so that can go against you. I think for a lot of recreational runners, a lot of maybe the people who kind of listen to your podcast, they're not going to be doing the marathon where they have an energy drinks table especially set up for them and there's somebody handing it out to them. They're going to rely on what's in the race. So when I did the London Marathon in 2006, the brand that was the brand of drink that is provided at that competition, they're a sponsor. So you can't have something else to get used to that drink, whether you like it or not, because that's what they're going to give you. So when I did my 20-mile runs, I would place a bottle of that drink at the distances, roughly at the distances where we were going to get in the race, because they tell you in advance, so that I got used to running a certain distance, picking up the drink, drinking a certain amount, and then, running more until I got the drink again. I did that as well. There was a 20-mile race. It happened to be snowing in March, but I did the same thing. I had a drink with me. I dropped it on. It was a lap, a multiple lap one. So we came back to the same. So I was able to leave my drink somewhere, do another whatever number of miles, pick it up again and drink it. Now it'd been covered up by snow in the time it took me to come around again, but I found it. And I think, so if you planned to use, or if you train and you use caffeine during the race, but you're not going to get it in the real thing, no point. You trained an adaptation that isn't going to work for you. So you have to take reality into account. What's actually going to happen in the marathon or the half marathon. I'm not sure caffeine gives such a huge advantage that's going to make a difference. Don't know how many of the world's top athletes have it. Certainly sugar is a help, and caffeine will.
Well, the fact that you are the expert and you don't know of the elite athletes using it, that's quite telling, I would say.
Yeah. When I did that London Marathon, I hit the wall at about 23 miles. I had to walk a bit, and I didn't expect it at all. And in the London Marathon, thousands of spectators, and one guy happened to have his hand out holding out jelly babies, and I grabbed these jelly babies, and they gave me such a spur energy. I couldn't believe it. And I actually did the last section of the race in the same time as Haile Gebrselassie, who was an amazing runner. Obviously, I wasn't that close to him, but this running out of energy can happen to anybody. And although I never did a marathon after that, I always thought, if I were doing another one, I'd get a little bag, I'd put in some sugary sweets, jelly babies or whatever, pin them to the inside of your shorts, so that when you're struggling around about mile 22 to 23, you have them ready. Because although I'd been having the energy drinks, I still ran out of fuel. What surprised me as well, I always thought that even if I hit the wall, I would be psychologically strong enough to push through the barrier, push through the pain, if you like. Didn't work. Didn't make a difference. If you haven't got fuel, you can't run. It's reality. It's like a car. If it hasn't got fuel, it's not going to go. People are the same. So I've seen that written before. You can push through it. You can't, because you haven't got anything to use. If there's no fuel, your muscles aren't going to work. I don't know who the man was with the jelly babies, but I'm grateful to him. And that maybe would be some advice, is to have something tucked into your shorts so that you have that boost if you need it.
He was a race saver, so yeah, have a backup. Yeah. I'm just thinking of the example you gave of the runner running without a time. She was just going by feel. And we were talking about like training harder than you actually compete. Is that a kind of an idea that you would recommend, so that you would try and run faster in your training than you plan to run in the actual race?
Yeah. If it's a half marathon and you're trying to do the 7-minute miles and you have a 10-mile race before that, you might want to do that, trying to do that in sub 7-minute miles, like 68 minutes. I always found it hard to run as fast in training as extrinsic motivation, if you like. But in general, this is nothing new. You generally do shorter distance faster than race pace, and longer distances slower. But you do need some sort of guide, like you say, to how fast am I going to. So if I'm aiming for 7-minute miles in the half marathon, but I can't do it in the 10 miles or even over 5. But I don't think you need to have done exactly in training what you need to do in the race, because there are massive advantages in a race over what's in training, and that is all of other. It's something I covered a lot in my studies, like the half marathon one, for example, on pacing and half marathon. You can resist going too fast, then the other people do help a lot. And this has been studied quite widely in pacing. We talk about herd behavior or the influence of opponents. I think it's a massive psychological benefit, and it does mean people should run faster in races than on their own.
Yeah, it's kind of like this intangible that it's just like, it kind of feels like normal to go a bit faster if other people are going faster around you, and you kind of don't even realize it, or before you realize it, you're just maintaining that faster pace. which is the real big benefit of a race. So you mentioned you did the full marathon and that you hit the wall. So it leads me to ask the question then that some people would say is, full marathons, they're not actually healthy. For like a human to run that length of time continuously, it's actually detrimental to their health. Maybe it's a myth, but it's just something that I've heard. What are your thoughts around that idea?
Well, after I did that marathon, I was sick for 2 weeks. Went to the doctor and she said I had a virus in my head. I didn't know that. I don't know whether I had that during the marathon. That's why I was affected. I really don't know, but I was really sick. Now, some people seem to be able to do marathons every few weeks, or you can get these charity ones where they do them every day. The marathon is an interesting event because, of course, it was invented, if you like, for historical reasons or mythical reasons, 1896. There never was such a thing as a 26-mile race. It just didn't exist. It hadn't really been conceived of doing that kind of thing. Of course, that wasn't even the distance of the marathon changed quite a bit in its early years. So in a way, it's an event where up to 20 miles, pretty much most people are okay. It's in that last 6 miles where really you do run out of fuel. Ignoring the world's best because they're slightly different. Shoes and all those now playing a part in that. The race to 20 miles, if you like, is completely different from the last 6. I'll never forget that London Marathon whereby it was like different people on different conveyor belts or something, and some were going fast and some were going slow, and then you could pass someone out who's dying and then they pass you out later on, or someone passes you out and then you pass, because everybody is sort of not collapsing, but everybody's reaching that point where they run out of fuel at different times, and therefore everybody's going to slow down. It's just when is it going to happen? So it's an event that's going to drain you. If for some reason they decided the marathon was going to be 20 miles, if there had been the historical distance between Marathon and Athens, then maybe it wouldn't be this man killer, if you like. But because it's just beyond what is normal, and this is obviously going to affect people who take longer to do it, maybe even more. Because of that, how long it is, it can really drain you. It's definitely going to drain you energetically, and physically. It can affect you if you're not really designed for running, or you're designed for a different type of run.
Yeah. So I can think of a sprinter would be the obvious example, like Usain Bolt's physique. He's designed typically to be much more athletic than or faster than Mo Farah, for example. He's built the longest.
Yeah. So the way I look at it is the way I try to think about it is that a certain amount of how well you do it in any athletic event is going to be genetic. If you're not born with fast twitch fibers, you're not going to be. A certain amount is going to be hard work. So it doesn't matter if you're born with fast twitch fibers. If you don't actually train, you're not going to make it as a world-class sprinter. But I think the other aspect that I think some people don't think about or forget is that there's being in the right niche. And what I mean by that is that everybody is suited to one sport or another, or one event in athletics more than the others. Now, you might not be great at it, but you'll fit it best. So we mentioned the fast twitch fibers. You've got fast twitch fibers, you could become a sprinter. If you're really tall and slim, you might do the high jump. If you're a big, heavy person, you might do the shot put or other throws. So the people who, like you mentioned, Mo Farah, those kind of people, their niche is for those who are slim, they're light, they have high aerobic capacity. They're the niche of endurance runners. And it's linked to genetics. So an athlete in the wrong niche will not succeed no matter how much work they do. Given your example, Usain Bolt could train 7 days a week all the time trying to be a marathon runner, and it's not going to happen for him because he's in the sprinter niche. Yeah? So, I've come across world-class athletes, including a world champ, who said, I didn't succeed because of talent. I didn't have any talent. It's because of all the hard work I did. It's just because I worked hard. Giving the impression that you too could have been a champion if you worked hard. But it's not fully true, because they just happen to be in the right niche. So these world champions, these endurance people, they, slim, they would have had a high VO2 max, they would have had the right elasticity in their muscles or whatever. And if it was just hard work, they could have succeeded in anything. They could have been the world champion high jumper or shot putter, but that's not true. So, I think the word talent, I say they're not talented. I think the word talent, the problem is that people, they conflate that with skill. So, a distance runner might not be able to do gymnastics, or might not be able to do something skill, like the pole vault or hurdles. So the talent they have, the talent a distance runner has, is internal. It's the things you can't see, like the high VO2 max, or maybe they've got really great mitochondria, or they have a really high lactate threshold. So they are talented. They have to work hard to develop it, of course, to be the best in their niche. But if you run the wrong event, then you're not going to succeed. And I know a lot of people do the marathon because it's seen as a sort of a challenge, but ultimately a lot of the people who are trying to do the marathon are in the wrong niche. They are not endurance runners, so they're gonna struggle a bit more than others. Some people are suited to it, some people just aren't. But I understand, not everybody who does the marathon is trying to win it. It's a personal challenge to do 26.
Yeah, absolutely, very challenging. Makes me think of we talked about patience earlier, and it's kind of like, and planning and being strategic. It's like that's another kind of the psychology of how you approach a race is also very, very important as well. Like it's maybe it could be a genetic factor, it could be like patience, or it could be a skill you develop and work on. And yeah, it just makes me.
I think it's definitely a skill you can work on. It's. Like I said, I always used to, I didn't coach that many. I used to coach some decent women distance runners. I would always say, just have to ignore everybody else at the beginning. They're not going to keep that up. If you try to keep up with them, neither will you. So you just have to ignore them, because if you don't, you're just going to trust yourself. Just trust me. Just go slowly at the beginning. You'll feel like you're going too slow, but if we actually timed you, you're probably going fast. So just, forget about how you perceive things, and just trust yourself that going too slow, feeling like you're too slow.
Yeah, and you can imagine as well in the intensity of a race day, like, a little bit of nerves, all the people around you and stuff. It would be so easy to get caught up and be like, I have to go faster. And the last thing you want to do is to go slow. But it's probably especially important because the intensity in the environment to go that little bit slower, just so that you're going at your own pace.
Yeah, I think actually sometimes in the mass marathon, New York or London or wherever, actually people don't start off too fast because there's so many people around them. It's not possible to go too fast. So that can actually help a bit, having the crowds around you. But of course, if all of the crowds are going too fast, it can be quite difficult. I think you can learn patience, and actually in pacing studies on children tend to be worse at pacing themselves than adults. So I think it is something you realize pretty quickly. Some people never learn though. They always go off too quick every single time.
They make it their own style maybe. But so switching it up and just going to the research you've done. So you had a study called Grizzlies and Gazelles. You looked at duty factor. So these are all terms I've never heard of before. I'm only new to running. But I have heard of Leeds, the Premier League soccer club, or I should say football club. I get killed back in Ireland for calling it soccer. But can you tell us just a little bit about what it was like to work with those professional athletes? What is a Grizzly, a Gazelle, and duty factor?
Yeah, so I had heard two coaches during the summer use the word Gazelle. I hadn't said it to them. They had said it to me first, if you know what I mean. One in Australia and a guy from a coach from Kenya. And they were describing athletes as running like gazelles. And automatically that will give you an idea of this sort of bouncy, slim person maybe bouncing along. And when I wrote the paper on these footballers, I used Grizzly as the opposite of a gazelle. Partly because it was also the same letter. But when I looked into it more, gazelles are what we call cursorial, means they're designed to run. So certain animals are designed to run. They will normally land on the front of their foot, or their paws or their hooves or whatever will be orientated so they land on the front. They have very low duty factors, which I can explain in a second. So certain animals, especially on the savannah in Africa or wherever, they will be designed to run. So danger comes and they can run for a long time, get away from the grizzly bears. On the other hand, what was interesting about them is they're non-cursorial. So they're not designed to run. Now they can run very fast, but they don't normally. That's not their niche. I do like this biological niche. That's not their niche. Their niche is being big and powerful and strong. And they run plantigrade, which means they land on their heel. If you like, if compare with a human, they land on their heel and they roll off the front. So they're not forefoot. They're the sort of rear foot strikers, if you want to. So what happened with the Leeds United players was they came to us last year. We tested them various tests. So we tested whether they were symmetrical or not for strength tests, for jump tests, for sprinting tests. We ran them on a treadmill and 3 different speeds. So 12 kilometers an hour, fairly light jog, 16 kilometers an hour, and 20 kilometers. Now, 20 kilometers an hour is pretty fast when they're running for up to a minute of that speed. But we were lucky because Leeds United, there was a paper on them in the Athletic showing on the Athletic website about Leeds United, which showed that they outran every single other Premier League team. They ran, an article in the Athletic, what they found, what they showed, was that the Leeds United team under Marcelo Bielsa, as it was then, ran many more sprints and more total distance during the Premier League season, 38 games, than any other team in England by quite a long way. Probably more than any other team in Europe because it was such a big difference. So we were lucky in terms of we had players who were extremely fit. They were used to running very long distances and therefore they could do the speeds. Now, it was interesting because Calvin Phillips, he's played for England and so on, he found it easier to run at 20 kilometers an hour than at 12. He didn't like running slowly, he likes running fast. So we collected the data on the players, which was very interesting. It told us certain things about the players. We have a treadmill in our laboratory at Leeds University, which we bought it around about the time of the pandemic, so we didn't get to use it for quite a long time. So it was really the first work we did with it was on Leeds United. So the data were interesting in themselves, but there was nothing spectacular standing out at the beginning. Then what happened later on in the year was we tested some athletes, world-class athletes from the UK, world's fastest man over 800 meters, Olympic finalists, European Championship and marathon runners, and so on. So we analysed them with the exact same protocol that we had done with the player. Clearly, the runners found it a lot easier. They looked much easier. And actually, we ran them at 24 kilometers an hour as well because they were able to do that for a minute. They were that kind of good. But what was interesting was that we looked at this variable called duty factor. And what I noticed was that in the runners, most of them had a predictable pattern. So the better runners had lower duty. But there was one athlete who was the best athlete, and he didn't follow the pattern at all. He stood out as having this massive duty factor, which was not what we'd expected at all. So given he was the best runner, I thought, if he doesn't fit the pattern, then why does he not fit the pattern? What's different about him? And then I looked back at some data I had from 2017 World Championships. So the 2017 World Championships, the IAAF sponsored biomechanics research project, and I was in charge of analysing the middle distance and long distance events there. So I had the data from the 1500 meters and the women's 800 and other ones like that. And what I noticed actually was a similar pattern was happening, whereby the gold and silver medalists in the men's 1500 meters had really high duty factor, which is not what you'd expect to see. So it was a bit like this person we had, in Leeds. He's not following the pattern. He's different. Well, these Kenyans were the same. They're different. So what duty factor is, it's a really easy measure to do, which is why I like it. You only need to know two things: the contact time during a step and the flight time. And then you do an equation with those two variables in it, occasion involved. But basically, you're dividing contact time by total stride time, which is contact time plus flight time multiplied by 2. So it gives you a ratio. You might want to, I've called it also previously the stance swing ratio. So how long your foot is in contact with the ground relative to how long the total sort of duration is for it to go around. And if your contact time and your flight time are exactly equal, say 0.2 seconds or 0.3 seconds, doesn't matter. As long as provided they are equal, your duty factor is 0.25. In sprinters, it might be less than 2. In 10,000 meter runners, it might be 0.3. So it's kind of in the range 0.2 to 0.4, depending on how fast. But it's a really nice measure to use, because it relates well with something we call leg stiffness. Now, leg stiffness is dictated by the stiffness of your muscles and your tendons and your ligaments and so on. And in general, marathon runners will want to have high stiffness. So what that means is when they run, their knee doesn't bend too much. They might land on the forefoot, maybe, I don't know. But the knee won't bend an awful lot. So that means that their body doesn't sink down too much, and you get this gazelle-like running style. So it's kind of familiar to people. You might see long distance runners moving along. They bounce a lot. They land on the forefoot. This is related to running economy. So when I went back to the data we'd collected on the distance runners, first of all, it was clear that we had a really good marathon runner, really low duty factor, relative, the same speed as the other guys, relatively low duty factor, really high leg stiffness. British triathlete, elite woman, same thing, low duty factor, high. Then we look at this 800 meter run, really high duty factor, low stiff. And the Kenyans, we were able to calculate their stiffness as well as their duty factor. We're talking even higher duty factors. Ones you would say, how is that possible for a middle distance runner? And really low stiffnesses. So I thought, this is interesting, because these are two different running styles. And this kind of explains as well why a lot of studies on stiffness and duty factor, they have conflicting results. So you read one study that says, oh, this should be the way the stiffness is, and then you read another one that says the opposite thing is, well, maybe it's because they were different types of runners. So then I went back to the Leeds Utd data. Okay, maybe I can apply what I've found from these distance runners to the players. Now, there have been other studies done by a French-speaking group and they use the terms aerial and terrestrial. Every time I use the word terrestrial to people, they laughed because they were thinking of extraterrestrial. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to call them aerial and terrestrial. I'll call them grizzlies and gazelles. So the gazelles are the aerial ones. They're really bouncy. They have high leg stiffness. They have high ground reaction forces. They tend to fit a certain pattern. And if you do the statistics, they all match up. So the grizzly bears, they're more like, I don't want to say they're powerful, they're not necessarily bigger, but they rely more on their contact phase. They push themselves forwards, not upwards. They bend their knees much more, so they've got low stiffness. So the grizzlies and gazelles thing came about because I wanted to see, because I think certain positions in soccer are suited to different styles. Now, this is not particularly surprising when I tell you that the wingers and fullbacks, they play on the outside. Are gazelles, yeah. The people who are central midfield, central defenders, they're the grizzlies. It's not really that surprising, but it was still interesting because from a tactical point of view, I think what that tells you is you need your gazelles to do the pressing. If you try to get grizzly bear type ones to do it, they're gonna get tired because their running economy is so much worse. And this has come back to the whole, once again, the niche thing. So you have certain people who fit the gazelle niche. They are springy, bouncy. They have a really good running economy. They can run for longer. You have the grizzly bear niche. They're fast. They can still be fast, but they're more, because they bend their knees more. They're maybe able to change direction easier. They might be more suitable for resistance training rather than plyometric training, which suits the gazelles. Now, of course, it's not like there's you're born as one of these, one or the other. There's a continuum, of course. We had some players who were really low juice factor and some were high, but everybody's on that continuum. So some people, we said they were neither nor, they were just a mixed juice line. And I think we also had one player who was a winger who was what we call kangaroo. Now, I didn't invent the word kangaroo. There is such a thing in gait as a kangaroo gait. And what that means is the faster you run, the more economical you become. So most people's leg stiffness stays the same. And that's what we found. So the people who were gazelles, they had a high leg stiffness at 12, 16, and 24, and 20. It didn't change. The people who were grizzlies, they had the same low leg stiffness at 12, 16, and 20. It didn't make a difference. But there was one player in particular, he had a low stiffness at 12 that increased to a middle value at 16 to a really high value at 20. That's unusual. That is not what's in the literature, but it's known. But when I looked into it more, I found people call it a kangaroo gait, and I told him this, and he was quite actually happy to be the kangaroo. But that's quite unique. It's very rare for that to happen. So in a way, and I've talked to the football people in Leeds United. I've talked to the athletes. I've talked to world-class triathletes, and people like the grizzly and gazelle thing because they get it. They understand why would everyone like this, and I think, like I said, it comes back to the niche thing whereby, what I said to Leeds United, imagine all the players decide they're going to run a marathon for charity. The gazelles, they can get under 3 hours if with the right training. The grizzlies won't even make it to the start because they're not suited to it. And I think, why do certain people struggle in the marathon when, because 30,000 people do London Marathon, well, they're not all gazelle-like suited to the race. A lot of them will be this grizzly type. Who would be better off doing 800 meters or 1500 meters, but they want to do the marathon because there's a challenge to the marathon. So as well as being physiologically suited or not to the marathon, you can be biomechanically suited or not. I don't think people have looked at that as much. They measure VO2 max, running economy, they measure lactate threshold, but they don't really measure spontaneous running style, which is what I'm talking about when I talk about the grizzlies and gazelles.
Interesting. Yeah. So you're making me think that I am a grizzly. Because that's, I don't know, is it something to do with the resistance training? And I always try and, squat through my heel or my midfoot. So then I run through the midfoot and the heel. But you mentioned earlier about doing like slow runs and stuff. And I can run, my typical pace is like somewhere around like 8 to 9 minutes mile for like, my longer runs. But I can go under 6, I can go 6.5, under 6 if I strike on the forefront of my foot.
Yeah.
So does that mean that I'm a kangaroo or that I just run fast? Or what would you make of that I can do both,
I think by changing your running style, you might be slightly kangaroo. It's hard to know without testing you. But we were running them at their fastest speed of 20 kilometers an hour, which is, a kilometer in 3 minutes. So a mile in 4. So it's
fucking Roger Bannister times here. That's crazy.
But they're not doing it for 4 months. They're not doing it for that amount of time. That's the thing. When I say they were running for a minute, it would take time to get them up to the speed, and we needed them at least 30 seconds at the speed, and then we'd slow them down a bit. So they were probably not even doing a minute at that speed. But the distance runners, they could do it. They were used to it. So yeah, I think everybody is able to change a little bit, but in general, your leg stiffness is fairly fixed usually. And like you mentioned, there's a theory. It's not really developed very well yet because there's not enough research on it. But there's a theory that those who are, the grizzly bear types, they bend their knees more. Their ground reaction forces are smaller. They're more forward pushing than upward pushing. They respond better to resistance training, whereas the bouncier ones respond better to plyometric. Now, when I wrote the grizzlies and gazelles paper, one of the reviewers he gave me some good advice, which was, he said, it might not be that they're better suited to those things and they should just do them. It might just be that they want to achieve the same thing, so therefore they should use what suits them to achieve the same thing, if that makes sense. So you wanting to do a 3-hour marathon and somebody else who's a gazelle wanting to do a 3-hour marathon, you should train to your strength to achieve the same thing, because you'll probably respond to it. That's the thing with the grizzly gazelle thing. It's not either is better, it's just that they suit a different.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm thinking, let's say, I was to be classed as the grizzly, or anyone else listening, like we'll say it sounds like the more challenged of the long distance runners. So we should probably run a shorter distance by what you've said, but we're going to be hard headed. We're going to run the full.
Yeah.
My thinking would be, all right, I won't be able to get the pacing in, but I'll be able to get the extra mileage in. So let's just say, in theory, it's recommended in preparation for a full marathon that you do 40 miles a week on average, right? Yeah. Would it be possible to improve your performance or make the full marathon easier by doing something like 45 miles or 50? So basically, you're at a disadvantage, genetically, but you'll work a little bit harder. Is that realistic to think that way?
Yeah, I think so. I think, mileage doesn't matter. If you're going to do the marathon of 26 miles, then you need to do something close to that. Now, I used to get injured a lot. So my body I tried doing twice-a-day training. My body couldn't cope. I couldn't straighten my knee one more. So I used to do low mileage, but that would still mean doing 18 to 20, a run at the weekend that was it's near the marathon distance. And I didn't do that many marathons. You can't just do 5 or 6 miles training and then suddenly magically do a half marathon. You need to be on your feet for a certain amount of time, and you need to be able to do the distance. You're not magically going to be able to cover a distance. Now, 26 miles is different because I don't think you need to do 26 miles in training to run 26 miles in the race, because, as we already said, you'll drain yourself too much. But you need to get close to it at least once a week or once every few weeks, just so you're getting close to it. But in sometimes my mileage, and I wasn't a brilliant marathoner. I'm not saying it like I was, but I might not have done much more than 40 to 50 miles some weeks because I just couldn't. But I focused more on a bit like what you said, working harder in terms of doing it fast. I see there's a trend now a lot for, everything should be slow. And I think this is, from what I understand, this is a confusion, because what a study found, I think it was by Carl Foster in America, was that athletes were doing their fast runs too slowly and their slow runs too quickly. And he was saying, and people took that, people are doing slow runs too quickly, so we should slow down. He also said that they were doing their fast runs too slowly. And people only picked on the bit where we should do some things slowly. They didn't pick up on things, but we should do the other ones fast. So I used to do fewer runs, but do them faster, because I couldn't, the mileage, I couldn't do it. And that might be a grizzly way of doing it. So instead of 10 miles slowly, do 5 miles quick, just because. I'll give you another example. There was one of the speakers at the European Endurance Conference, which we organised in my university last November. He gave a really good example of an 800-meter runner who had been considered lazy by a previous coach. And what he said was, no, she wasn't lazy. She just wasn't able to do long distances, because she was an 800-meter runner who was sort of a cross between 400 meters and 800 meters. So what really she needed was low mileage, but really high quality. And that is sort of the grizzly thing. I think they're not suited to long distances. So better for them to do lots of short stuff fast. You can get 800-meter runners who are 800/1500-meter specialists, and it'll suit them to do longer distances, because you can have a grizzly and a gazelle in a race, and either they have different strengths. The gazelle is more economical, so maybe they can get to the finish easier, but the grizzly will probably have a better sprint finish because they're able to generate that horizontal force you need for sprint finish when running economy doesn't count any. So it's kind of, if you're doing the marathon, you just have to sometimes accept, okay, I'm doing it for the challenge. I'm not suited to it. I'll do my best, but I'm not going to magically do 2 hours 20. It's just not going to happen. No matter how hard I work, I'm not biomechanically suited to it.
Yeah, it's kind of knowing your own niche, like you said earlier, and just completion as well is a big thing. I know it's not particularly exciting to be like, oh, I completed the race, but it's like, if you've never done it before, that is the achievement, you know? So once you've completed it, I think then you can go refining it and be like, right, second time out now, I'm going to try and hit a specific time. That's a much more practical way to go about it.
I was just going to say, I think sometimes people are too hard on themselves, or they don't realize just how physiologically hard a marathon is. Sorry to cut across you, but we did a study on risk taking in runners, and we did this massive survey of thousands of people via Runners of the World sort of promoted our research. And what was really interesting was we asked them an open question, which was, why do you think, if you slow down in the second half of the race, why do you think this was? And nearly everybody blamed wind, the weather. One person said, I had to change my artificial leg. One person blamed the crowds for being too noisy. There was also barely anybody. Very few people said, well, I ran out of fuel or I ran out of steam. They put more like that. And I think, but that's why nearly everybody slows down, is because the marathon is so hard. You're going to slow down because you run out of glycogen. So people almost didn't, they didn't realize that it's normal to slow in the second half. It's not someone else's fault, or it's not force's fault, or it's just a normal thing that happens, and you have to accept that. So in a way, you have to be prepared for it. And maybe if you've done one, like you said, and you've got time, you've completed it. Oh, great! I'm going to do it again. Just realize that maybe not for the elites. Most people are going to suffer in the second half simply because of the nature of the event.
Absolutely, and suffer I did in the first half marathon. As I said, I ran too fast, hit a wall around mile 9, and then I started blaming everybody around. Just all the excuses were coming, and I was like, kind of catastrophizing actually as well, just being like, it's I might as well stop or something. And then I kind of was like, no, like, you've a part in this yourself. So once you look at it like that, what can you do now? Then I was like, you know what? It's my first one. I'll complete it. I'll be happy with that. Yeah. And then once I kind of realized that, then I was able to get back on track, and I actually finished with a decent time. But yeah, it goes back to the planning point of like having a plan, being strategic, and not getting caught up on anyone else's time or the moment at all.
Yeah, when I hit the wall, I remember thinking, I've done all this training and now I'm walking. But a few guys I knew from back home, from Leeds, they went past me, they were cheering me on, and people were cheering for me, and I got the sweets and all that, and I was able to get back on. Actually, I got back pretty much to the pace I should have been on. I lost a lot of time, but once I got to that hit the wall point, it really was a case of, I just want to finish now, and who cares? Like you say, you got to change your mind. Okay, you're not going to get where you wanted, but whatever you get will be good.
Yeah.
Or whatever you get will be worth doing.
Absolutely. That's my next question. What was the sense of achievement like when you finished?
It was really good. Yeah, I did 2:36, which was, like I said, slower than I wanted because I hit the wall. But
give me so for people who don't know, right? I'm aware about 2:36. If you have 1,000 people do the marathon, how many people are going to do? Like, what percentile do you think you're in there?
I know I finished 120th in the men's race.
Wow, so
and there were 30,000.
That's the elite of the elite, nearly.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but I was in what's called the championship race. So there's an elite, there's the truly elite people, like from Kenya and Ethiopia and all that. And then they have the championship race, which is open to anybody from a British club who can run 2:45 or better. So I had a time from Belfast Marathon of 2:41. So I qualified for that. And so we're not in the mass start. We're not treated like the elite, but we're treated a bit better than the mass start. So we don't have to wait for an hour standing, waiting to go. There's tents provided divided and toilets and you're a little bit closer to the front. I was, in a sense, competing in a race with other club members. So I'm not in the elite, I'm not in the fun runners or the charity runners or whatever. I'm, nearer the front. When I finished, just really happy to finish. In the end, like I said, I didn't feel well the whole way around. Maybe it was as far as I don't know whether I was sick beforehand or not. I just remember finding the splits I was doing harder than they should have been because I was able for that. I'd done it already in a 20-mile race. Even after a mile, I didn't feel right. But I felt really good at the end. They give you lots of goodies, but I was really sick for 2 weeks after it. Really, really sick. Like I said, I had to go to the doctor. I felt so bad. I don't know how to describe it, but yeah, I was really, 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 really happy just to finish. I never ran a marathon again. I wasn't able to, but I think I learned a lot from that. And like I said, things I learned: make sure you have your jelly babies with you. One thing I would say that's difficult about these big city marathons, your listeners or whatever, is you have to be much more prepared than I was in terms of the food you're going to have, because you might be traveling to Boston or New York or wherever for your big marathon. You're not at home, so you don't have your own bed. You don't have your own kitchen. And both when I did Belfast and London, didn't really get the food the night before I needed to. It just wasn't possible. A strange city, and I don't know where anything is. So the elite athletes won't have that problem. Local athletes might have that problem, but most people will have this problem where we went somewhere to eat and portions they gave us were way too small for running a marathon the next day. And this was a pre-marathon special meal put on, so you end up wandering around.
Yeah, it sounds like a little bit of bad luck that caused you to stop, but in spite of that, you still had a great time in the marathon of 2:36. Though it kind of leads me to my next question then. So another kind of like misconception, idea, whatever you want to call it, is running is bad for your knees. So I feel as though, having a podcast on running sort of answers this question in and of itself. Running isn't bad for your knees, I would say personally, but you're the authority, Brian. What would you say about running and knee pain or arthritis? What are your thoughts on that?
It's really hard to say, because running can be bad for your knees if you're a bad runner, if that makes sense. So, I teach modules on sports injury, and the first thing I always tell the students, or one of the first things I always tell them, is that every injury is caused by biomechanics, every single injury. And the specific factors, the main factors, is what we call stress. So sometimes it's just effectively force. And if the force is too great, things will break. That's the same for every material on the planet, right? So your body isn't any different. It comes back to the psychology thing. You can't think yourself injured, or you can't, if something is torn, it's torn. You might think it isn't, but it is. So if the stress is too great, you're going to have a problem. Now, our bodies are actually quite well designed for certain stresses. So one form of stress we call compression, just when something gets squeezed, and our bones are really good at compression. They like it, actually. So astronauts go into space a long time, bones become brittle because they haven't got weight bearing. So this is why weight bearing is really important, because it's compression, good for the bones, it helps them remodel and so on. So this is why aerobics is. There's another kind of stress we call tension. This is sort of a pulling stress. And muscles are good with that, and ligaments and tendons are good with that, because that's what they're designed to do. Bones are not so good at it because they're not designed to do it. Usually, our bodies are quite good at coping with compression and tension. So you sort of run along, your bones get compressed, that's okay, makes them better actually. Your tendons and ligaments get pulled on, that's fine, that's what they're designed to do. But one of the other sort of forms of stress is called torsion. I think this is one of the main reasons why running can be bad for your knees, but not just running. Activity can be bad for your body. So a classic example of a torsion injury would be the anterior cruciate ligament tearing in sports. So sometimes you put your foot down, it gets fixed in place for some reason, try to turn, and your ACL tears because you've had that twist in your knee. That is probably the most common way it gets torn. So our bodies are not really well designed to cope with torsion. We're very linear creatures. We don't twist a lot. That's not really the way we're designed. So if you have a running style, or maybe bad running shoes, or whatever that means you have a lot of torsion, I think then it can be bad for your knees. It's not so much the running as in the way you're doing it. So sometimes people have got weak hip muscles, so they drop on one side, or it rotates too much outwards. One of the players we've tested, is landing on the outside of his foot, and if you show that to somebody who doesn't understand biomechanics, they'll think, oh, there's something wrong with their foot. No, there's something wrong with their hip. Yeah, because it's the whole leg has been turned outwards from the hip downwards. So that will put pressure on the knee. So I don't think running is bad for your knees. I think torsional forces are bad for you and for other parts of your body. So you have to make sure that you have got a good running style, if you like. And I didn't, despite being a biomechanist, I had a bad running style. I've got a slight scoliosis in my cervical bone. So that's why I got these injuries, because I wasn't good biomechanically. I did my best. But if you want to be a top marathon runner doing 150 miles a week or whatever it is, you can't manage that with bad biomechanics. So I don't think running is bad for your knees, but all exercise will involve stress. And if the stresses are inappropriate or you can't cope with them or they happen in a way that damages your biological tissues or your connective tissues, then you're going to get injured.
That's actually what my kind of next question would have been. Is it's kind of a stress situation. So it's like running is fine, but if you do too much running for your kind of niche, as you said it, or your running style, like Gazelle, or you do too much too soon, or you don't give yourself a sufficient recovery, or you have the wrong shoes. It's all the other little things. If you're not patient, for example, and you just you mismanage yourself, then that's how I would say it's more likely to get an injury. But
there was I can't remember the author of the study, but there's a really nice one where it said 75% of injuries caused by training errors. In other words, or those things you mentioned, incorrect progression, too much overload too early, not enough recovery. So actually most injuries are preventable if you follow the principles of training that most people know, are familiar with, like progress slow to overload. But people aren't patient, so they go too quickly, and that's why, because your body can cope with the stresses, but you have to give it time to compensate for what it has done already in training.
Yeah, absolutely. Like people starting off the race too fast when their normal pace might be a slow start, or maybe some people shouldn't even start with running. Maybe they should start with walking and build up that way or something. But I think if you find the right load, your body can definitely tolerate a load. You just have to find out what that load is, and running is definitely not bad for your knees.
No, it's if I were to go out running now and try to do what I used to do, I'd be injured. You have to build up slowly, and that's why it's children who want to do running low loads to begin with, get used to it, get the right movement patterns, develop what we call physical literacy, that you know how to balance, move properly. That's more important than that's obviously better in the long run than doing lots of miles. It's the same, you'll know the same for lifting weights and things. Start off on light weights, do the technique properly, because there's no point in lifting a big massive weight. You'll have seen them in the gym, people doing biceps curls, but they're barely moving their elbows at all. What they're doing is they're moving their back, they're moving their whole spine backwards so that the weights are moving upwards, but they're not using their elbows. So good technique is really important to develop in line with your fitness. Just don't go too quickly, because it'll come if you're patient, and don't start your marathon training program too late.
I know the term has been coined, like ego lifting, lifting and trying to show off, but I'm sure there's ego running as well. It just hasn't been as widely used. I'm sure there's people who try and run too fast or too much beyond their ability. So it's good to clear that up from an expert such as yourself. But Brian, this has been brilliant. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Is there any final messages or links or anything you want to talk about, or anyone who's like new to running, doing their first half marathon, or even me, any final messages you want to leave us with?
I think there's a lot of nonsense on the internet, if I'm honest with you. Yeah, I see a lot of things that are biomechanically completely. And what I would say to people is don't worry too much sometimes. So, you might read on, say you're a heel striker, you're going to be overstriding, you're going to have this, you're going to have that. But you can't change the way you are, just like that. Talk about grizzlies and gazelles and kangaroos. You're going to have a running style that you've developed over years and years. You can't just magically change it. Also, you shouldn't feel bad that you run that way. I was a heel striker. Most of the world championship athletes are heel strikers. I think Kipchoge is a heel striker. It might be different for 800 meter guys, but most of your listeners will not. So don't feel like, you read something and it's telling you, you should be using this app, you should be running this way. If you don't wear this, just do what you can do, because a lot of stuff that people put out there is scientifically incorrect. It's based on what they've observed, what they've done themselves, and research is good. There's a lot of stuff out there that people can read. If you don't understand it, often there's an email address. Email the person, ask them. You don't have to read the most complicated research in the world, but often there will be something available. So I a lot of what I'm working on now is around what we call overstriding, which people people say, oh, such and such overstrides. There's no proper definition of overstride. And actually the best athletes in the world do more of this so-called overstriding than the average runner. So, because that's the only way to run faster. So a lot of misinformation, I think sometimes. When you're running, you will almost always run your best style. It might not be attractive. It might be ungainly. It might not be even the most economical, but it's probably going to be the best for you because it's your body and it's the way you've learned to run. It'll improve with time. You know, your muscles get stronger. Your legs might get stiffer. Your arms might work better, but don't feel like there's an exact way you must run, because everybody runs differently. Don't read too much into some of the stuff online. Find somebody who's experienced like you or not and has the credentials and qualifications, and work with that person to improve what you have, because you might be a grizzly, you might be a gazelle, you might be whatever. And you can't necessarily change that, but you can work to improve yourself.
Kind of like own your own style, whatever that is, and don't get caught up in the misconceptions, because you only have one style, but there's probably 1,000 more misconceptions out there, especially if you go look online.
Yeah, definitely. It's like everything. It's just the way it is now.
Right, Brian, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you.